Sports Highlights. This all started way back in February of 1992. Greg Bickaveris, glad you're with us. Our guests today are Jeremy Fritz and Jason Pryor. And of course, our program airs on Mondays at 7 a.m., 2 p.m., 7 p.m., weekends at 9 a.m. on Cox Cable 47 and 517. It was also a pleasure to do several football games this past fall with our great crew right here on NNPS Telecom. Our first guest today is Jeremy Fritz. He's the Director of Recreational Services at CNU. And I got to tell you, Jeremy, that must be a fun job.
It really is. And first, I just want to thanks for having me on. And yeah, it is. It keeps me busy, but it's fun. I think the thing that I really like about it is that I played intramurals as an undergrad. I was a club sport athlete. So I think I've been through it. And I think I've seen the benefits, and that was kind of a highlight of my career as a college student. So I think it's nice that I can give kind of students who may not be quite at that varsity level, but they still want to continue their sport. They still want to represent their university in a athletic background setting. So I think it's, at least for me, again, I'm a little biased, but I think it's nice that we kind of fill a little bit of a gap that aims maybe a little bit more towards kind of your normal student versus that very, very high-end kind of varsity caliber athlete.
Yeah, think about it, folks. Not everybody gets a chance to play Division I, II, or III sports, but intramurals is part of campus life. To me, it's essential, and it's a great avenue for these kids, like you said, that don't get that opportunity at the Division I, II, or III level, but they can stay on campus and excel.
And that's correct. So that's basically exactly what we aim to do. So we want to allow students, again, to continue playing that sport where they still want that team camaraderie, where they get some fitness, they get to still kind of play that sport, but at a slightly lower time commitment and also just kind of a general overall ability level. So yeah, like I said, we try and fill that void between maybe just a slight step down from the varsity program.
Well, let's talk about some of the different intramural sports you have on campus for men and women.
Yeah, absolutely. So typically we usually run about 7 different league sports a semester. So we do flag football, we do soccer, we do basketball, volleyball. Recently we've actually added kickball, which has become one of our more popular intramural sports. And we do some, I think we've touched on just about all of them. We do so many, I sometimes lose track. But then we also mix in some single day events too. Like we've done spike ball tournaments. We'll do cornhole tournaments. We've done tennis tournaments. So we try and be really open. We're actually going to do a pickleball tournament. So it's really what the students want to do. We're pretty flexible in that we try and really cater to what the students want.
And I guess you got to shift because you have a lot of indoor facilities there. If the weather's bad, you've got to play indoors, I guess. How about badminton? Do you have that?
So we don't currently have badminton, but I think that's something, again, there just hasn't been a huge outcry for it, unlike pickleball, where the students are just dying to get some pickleball out there.
Interesting. Yes, we've talked about that on the show before. Well, let's talk about who's eligible to play intramural sports at CNU. Is it the undergrad, the graduate student? Is it the community at large?
Yeah, so we try and keep it open to anyone within the CNU community. So we're actually open to all undergrads, grad students, faculty, staff are all eligible. One thing that's actually kind of cool is that our new president, President Bill Kelly, is actually on our intramural faculty staff softball team. So he's out there every Sunday playing against our students. So I think that's something that's been pretty cool to see President Kelly out there playing with the students.
I told you my mom taught there, so I would like to play, but I know that's a stretch. But my good friend Sonny Durst is very involved with the tennis program over there. But I think it adds to the quality of life. Academics, athletics, activities, it gives these kids an outlet from the academics, especially during the wintertime as we're in January right now.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. So we really want to try and give them a stress reliever, give them a way that they can kind of use up some of that built-up energy and maybe some of that frustration from studying and from kind of the slog of the winter time, to where they can get out there and, again, run off some of that energy and get some of those kind of competitive, those competitive juices flowing again. So, yeah, I think we try and do a really good job as far as that and really offering what the students want by being flexible with our program.
Talk about your collegiate background. You grew up in Ohio, of course.
I did, yes. So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. Actually went to the University of Kentucky for undergrad, so not too far from Cincinnati. And there, actually, I played club lacrosse. I played a number of different intramurals. I was on our ski and snowboard club. So I think that's helped me a little bit in that I've been through it. I had such a positive experience as a club sport athlete, as an intramural athlete. Because again, in high school, I played lacrosse. I swam. I did some different sports, and I was okay. But I was never that like D1 caliber athlete. But I wanted to continue playing the sports that I loved. I loved kind of that team camaraderie, and that's something I wanted to continue. So even when I was looking at schools, that was something that I really looked into, and I think you've seen that more today than probably ever, that sometimes students are really basing their college decisions off of what either that intramural or that sport club programs are offered at the different schools.
Well, that's a great example too, because you grew up in Ohio, and my mom went to Ohio State. So I know a lot of the kids that grew up in Ohio, you know this from being a young kid too, back in the day, that they're all brainwashed that there was only one school in Ohio, that's Ohio State. Now, how much of an influence was that? Because there's Ohio U, there's millions of colleges there, you know, Bowling Green, Toledo, whatever, but it seemed like everybody, the media, everybody said, well, Ohio State's playing this weekend, but you wouldn't hear much about the other Ohio schools. But was that a factor, and how much did you hear that growing up where you grew up at?
And that's funny. So actually, my final two schools that I came down to were Kentucky and Ohio State.
Right.
And I think it really did kind of factor in that I was pretty sure I could go play club lacrosse at Kentucky. I wasn't as sure that might have been the possibility at Ohio State, just with it being such a larger university. So that actually, it did factor in. And yeah, definitely growing up in Cincinnati, in my high school, the majority of the students went to Ohio State. Like you were going to Ohio State, going to UC, Ohio U. So I think going to Kentucky allowed me to do something a little bit different. And my dad actually went to Kentucky, so I think I was born a Wildcat.
Right, you got Kentucky colors on right now.
Yeah, so yeah, I've worked in a number of different schools, and they tend to usually go blue and white.
Ohio State's always had a great football program. Kentucky's always had a great basketball program, but absolutely. Well, you talk about some of the eligibility as far as playing intramurals. You still have to have a decent GPA. Are there any for students? I mean, you can't just show up and be, not do well in your academics, I assume.
Correct. So we just want to make sure, as long as you're in good standing with the university, then you can play with us. So as long as you kind of meet the minimum requirements to be a current CNU student, then on our side, then you're eligible. So we encourage and make sure that our students take their academics serious, especially at somewhere like CNU that does have high academic standards. But yeah, so again, as long as they kind of meet the CNU academic standings, then they're good in our eyes.
All right, we're talking to Jeremy Fritz. He's the Director of Recreational Services at CNU. A lot to offer on that campus. That campus has really grown. Back in the day, it was CNC, small college, but now it's a huge university that Paul Tribble pretty much helped put on the map, of course, as well as Dr. Santoro back in the day, and you got a new president now. But there's something for everyone at CNU. Something's always going on there, whether it's the library or culture arts or whatever, the graduations, the sports, the varsity sports. You got a lot to offer at CNU.
I totally agree, especially with it being, even though we're a smaller school and a D1 or a D3 school, I feel like a lot of the things that we do are very much at like a D1 level. Just from even stepping on campus, I know when I first got here, when I first visited campus, just walking around, you're kind of blown away by just by the style of buildings, and like especially you go out on the Great Lawn, you've got the library, and they're just beautiful and just so very almost over the top, where again, it's not something you would necessarily think you would see at a Division III university. So before I came to CNU, I worked at a D3 school up in New Hampshire, and it was a very, very different setting and university campus than CNU.
CNU is front and center on Warwick Boulevard.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's in a very high-profile place. I mean, that part of Warwick Boulevard and Jefferson Avenue right there near Oyster Point are very high-profile areas in Newport News, and people drive by it daily. Now, how do you put the schedule out? I mean, you've got a lot to schedule. You and I joked about Excel and PDF. You're constantly doing both. Talk about a typical schedule. How do you communicate? That's a lot of people, a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, so I'd say each semester we typically end up with about 200 different intramural sports teams. And then we've also got 34 different club sports teams that all practice. The majority practice on campus, some practice off campus, such like our swimming and our ice hockey teams. So yeah, it's a lot of moving parts. As I often tell our students, it's basically a big puzzle, and we try and piece it all together. Fortunately, there is a website called imleagues.com There are actually a couple of brothers that played intramurals at Boston College and University of North Carolina. Basically, they were big intramural guys. They saw the need and kind of the void to help people like me, like myself, when it comes to scheduling. They created this website, and it's pretty much become the monopoly, like the gold standard of all intramural recreational scheduling. I believe they've got over 1,000 different universities that use the website, and it does make my job significantly easier. If I had to do everything by old school pen and paper, it would be very, very tough.
Oh, goodness. What else are you involved in? You mentioned some other things you're involved with at CNU.
Yeah, so I also oversee our club sport program, as I kind of mentioned. So we actually have one of the largest D3 sport club programs in the country. So we've got 34 different clubs. We've got over 500 students. And I think the thing with sport clubs, which are pretty cool, is that I think not everybody totally understands what they are. And so the way I'd like to describe it to different students is you kind of have your varsity program at the top, your sport club programs are here, and then intramurals are here. So they kind of slot almost in between. So for our sport clubs, you're still going to practice typically usually 2 or 3 days a week. You're going to travel, play other universities. You're going to have full uniforms. So it's almost like a mini varsity program. But again, the competition level is a little bit lower. You're only practicing a couple days a week. So it kind of fits this little bit of a void area as well. And then I also oversee, we have an outdoor adventures program. So typically we usually do each semester, we do a number of different outdoor trips. Actually in February, we do a big ski trip. We take a charter bus full of students out to Wintergreen to go skiing and snowboarding. We always do a paintball trip. We've done some disc golf. We've done some mountain biking. So it's just an opportunity to try and get the students off campus for the day and kind of get them outside and get some exercise and just get them off campus. Let them have some fun.
Get some fresh air. Quick answer, do you have uniforms for the intramural student athletes?
So for the intramurals, we don't. So typically, when they sign up, they kind of pick a color, and so that's typically their team color. So they all kind of show up wearing either their black or their blue or whichever color they sign up for.
All right, Jeremy Fritz, thank you for your time, your talent, your treasure, for being on our January show. Happy New Year to you and your family, and thank you for enlightening us about CNU.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. All right, Jeremy Fritz right there. Stay tuned for our next guest, basketball shooting specialist Jason Pryor, right here on the January show. Stay tuned.
You're watching NNPS TV. Catch sports highlights on Mondays at 7, 2, and 7, and on Saturdays and Sundays at 9 a.m. Visit us online at nnpstv.com to view all your favorite episodes. NNPS TV, watching education happen.
What do I want to drink? Let's see. I think I'll get a water. Give me all the nutrients I need.
Welcome back to our second segment of our January 2024 show. Greg Picaveras, glad you're with us and our entire crew. Hope you enjoyed Jeremy Fritz in our first segment. It's a pleasure now to welcome Jason Pryor. He's at Passage Middle School where he teaches health and PE, but he's a basketball shooting specialist. Of course, military brat, grew up in Florida and Virginia, of course, and good to see you.
Yes, thanks for having me.
That's quite a title, basketball shooting specialist. And talk about your basketball background, how it all got started for you.
Sure. So it started when I was about 10, 11 years old. Picked up actually soccer first, and then baseball, and this is all when we were in Germany, myself, 2 brothers, and mom and dad. Dad was Air Force. And saw a guy named Michael Jordan. And of course, we know his influence on the world. And I just fell in love with it. So I began to watch him. I began to watch also guys like Isaiah Thomas, played for Detroit Pistons back in the day, and just trying to emulate some of those things. And it actually came easy to me at that age. I was a scorer in soccer, and so I tried to score the ball. I would practice as much as possible, and it became a knack at a young age. putting that ball in the basket. So I'd say probably about 12 years old, I really learned I could do something with it.
Well, you talk about basketball shooting specialists. Of course, it started off when you were a young kid. Of course, being overseas a lot, military brat, you've been all over the world.
Sure.
But shooting is very difficult from the free throw line. Shooting can be very difficult from the baseline. So three-point shooting is still a wonder. You see Curry doing so well. A lot of NBA players struggle at it. A lot of NBA players struggle at the free throw line. So what makes it so difficult shooting a three, and does that affect the game? Because mostly people score twos.
Yeah. So you have to put the work in. Perimeter shooting it's all about work ethic and repetition. If you want to learn how to shoot, you have to shoot the right way. So people go out and shoot, and they say, why isn't it going in? It's all about mechanics. The art of shooting is very underrated. You think about a golf swing, we know the details that goes into that. I mean, if we went out there and tried to swing, you'd have to learn the art and mechanics. So that is the biggest thing, is that people try to shoot. They could get up the reps, but their mechanics are way off. And if you practice the wrong way for a long time, here's the other kicker, it is very tough to become a shooter later on in your career. You can do it, but most people rely on other skills and they just don't become elite.
Right, because it used to be thinking of shooting threes as somebody's gunning on the basketball team. You know, you're ball hogging, you're gunning. But now it's a specialty art. But you set several world records. Talk about some of your records and accolades. Give us the full picture.
Sure. So probably my first one was Mr. Basketball of Florida in 1997, Florida Mr. Basketball. I was the nation's leading scorer that year at 38.7 points a game, and got a full ride, played at Clemson University, and then transferred to Longwood University, where I was an All-American there. I have several all-time leading records there for, I think, scoring. There's a couple where I'm most points in a game, free throw percentage, three-point percentage. And then from there, and also in high school, I did shoot 50% from three, which I didn't even realize that until I started breaking these records over COVID, and then I started looking back and kind of looking at how long have I been able to do this? And I saw that, shot 50 in high school. And then 1 year in Europe, I was playing out in Eastern Europe, and I did shoot 51% from the three-point line.
Wow. Now, you mentioned Clemson. Talk about your experience there playing basketball and the ACC. Talk about your coach and everything else.
Sure. My experience there, sitting the bench. But I'll tell you, that was a wonderful experience. I learned a lot about myself, just playing in that league, being able to be amongst the elite. I mean, I took one visit. That's how bad I wanted to go and play in the ACC. Of course, there's other leagues that have kind of come up as the top basketball leagues in the nation. But at that time, we know Dukes, North Carolinas. I mean, you had Vince Carters that were there at Carolina, Elton Brand, Jason Williams. So these were the teams that, I was going up against. But unfortunately, I didn't stay there long because I ended up transferring. But just getting on that court and wearing that uniform was wonderful. The coach there at that time, Rick Barnes, was big on defense. And so when I came out of a high school that did a lot of pressing, full court pressing, zone pressing, that was probably one of the things I didn't speed up enough on to get on that floor to get a lot of minutes. Offensively, I was great, but defensively, I needed more time.
Yeah, Rick Barnes was the coach at George Mason when I was a student there. He coached there 1 year before he went to Providence and then Clemson. But a lot of people frowned on Barnes, although he's still coaching Tennessee today, because he challenged the Godfather, Dean Smith, one time. He lost a lot of credibility on that. I'm not sure if you were on the bench that game.
I wasn't on the bench, but I do remember that clip.
What did you think about it when you saw it?
I was surprised.
Yeah.
I was surprised. Coaches have strong personalities, and you got coaches that have some things with them. They're human, but that was definitely. I mean, that guy pretty much did everything right.
Right.
And for him to challenge him was like a big, no.
Yeah, but Rick Barnes did not like being challenged either. He, a lot of people transferred because of Rick Barnes.
Sure.
You ended up going to Longwood, and Jerome Kersey played a big part in that.
Oh, absolutely.
Talk about him.
So I went to Longwood because my high school coach's college roommate was coaching there at Longwood. So at that time, because of my experience at Clemson, I wanted to play for a relationship, not the university. And so I went there because my high school coach had, of course, vetted his friend, and so I went there, did well, was leading the nation in scoring there at the time, my junior year, senior year, doing well, got invited to the Portsmouth Invitational, and was getting some NBA looks. And then I had a horrific ankle injury right at the end of the year. But toward the end, even with the ankle injury, Jerome Kersey reached out and said, hey, man, we see what you're doing. We'd like to try to help you get to the next level. Great guy.
He played in the NBA.
Yes, he did.
Unfortunately, he passed away. May his memory be eternal. Now, let me ask you this, too. What you do is also something the Globetrotters do as well.
Okay.
They like to shoot the three-point shot or the mid-court shot. Were you a specialty player that you could have possibly played for the Globetrotters? Had you ever thought about that?
You know what, the Globetrotters to me was an entertainment brand of basketball, and same thing with like the and one, and I'm more of a traditionalist.
Sure.
So I wasn't really attracted to it, even though I respect those guys.
Right, right. Well, what advice would you give to people that want to improve their three? I mean, you're not 22 anymore, so it takes a lot of effort and energy to shoot 53s, I'm sure, compared to when you were 22.
Sure. The advice is to don't put the cart before the horse, meaning when you're learning to shoot, you don't go out there to NBA range. You don't go out there to three-point range. You go right up underneath the basket, and you practice, never get bored with the basics. So I would start close, then slowly back your way out. And when you master the mid-range, which is where I got the majority of my high school points, was right there in the mid-range. It wasn't even a three. My high school coach actually asked me to shoot more threes, but because the mid-range was something I was really good at that time, and I was so comfortable with it, that is where my bread and butter was. So starting up close and then moving back.
Do you think you've gotten better as a three-point shooter as an older adult compared to when you were in your 20s?
Oh, definitely. It's because it's been a focus. Now it's a focus. I've been able to score the ball pretty much my whole life. But now being able to just say, okay, I'm gonna make myself a specialist and put all my effort into the three-point and beyond. And it's worked out. It's worked out well. It's a skill that I've always had, but I never really worked at it as far as becoming elite at it.
We're talking to Jason Pryor. He's a world-class basketball shooting specialist. He's at Passage. Talk about your time at Passage. What do you enjoy about that the most?
They're the kids. You know, the kids are wonderful there. There's some challenges, of course, but I'm there to help lead and mentor. And I don't talk about the records I've broken lately just because I want them to kind of find out themselves and see how they react. Say, hey, I've got a world record holder as a teacher. I've had just 2 students ask for my autograph, which has been kind of cool, but just to see them look at me and say, man, I can do something like that. And, you know, they ask me, why don't you go do something else? Why don't you go to the NBA? You're breaking world records. And my response is, number 1, I'm too old. And number 2, you know, I'm here for you. I do have aspirations around the shooting and things, but right now I really enjoy just being a mentor to the kids.
Yeah, because running up and down the court's not easy, too. Now, let me ask you this, and I'm sure you've done both indoor and outdoor shooting. Shooting outdoors in January or February is not the same as shooting indoors at a gym.
Oh, yeah.
Talk
outdoor
about
shooting.
the differences.
Yeah, the elements. You got the wind, the chill. You can shoot outside, and then it can, you know, help you in terms of just being an exaggerated form of training, so that when you get inside, comfortable. So there are some training benefits to that. Of course, you got the outdoor rims, which are a little bit tougher, thicker, harder. But if you are a knockdown shooter, it shouldn't matter. You know, you're shooting for the center.
And I love about basketball. You got people that have played with nets, with chains, without any net at all, and you've got to love that too. But I'm sure nobody studied a rim like you have. You probably know the front, the end of the rim, and why is it so? It's so humbling too that one day you can shoot a really good shot, the next time would be a brick or just miss everything.
Yeah.
We've all done that. We'll talk about the differences as far as studying the rim and knowing exactly where to shoot off the glass or something.
Yeah, so muscle memory. Muscle memory is key. And then mentally, actually knowing that 2 full-size basketballs can go through the hoop at one time.
Goodness.
A lot of players don't know that.
Yeah.
So when you miss, you actually really miss. And when I learned that fact, it kind of opened up some things for me too.
Yeah, there's bigger basketballs, smaller basketballs. There's ABA-style basketballs, the red, white, and blue. Which one do you prefer, the regular, traditional basketball when you shoot?
Sure, yeah, like the Wilson Evolutions are pretty good. Really nice. Those are the ones I usually shoot with.
I think it's great too, Jason. Some backboards are either glass or wooden backboards. I think it's good to experience all of that, don't you?
Oh yes, you should try to shoot on as many surfaces as possible. And again, with shooting, you know, after a couple shots, if you're really good, you'll adjust. You know, maybe the backboard is a little tough or the rim's looser. I can remember going to games, away games, where of course their gym is different. Even in our high level state championship games, district conference championship games in college, they're often played in coliseums where the depth perception is way different than having a wall right behind the backboard. So as a shooter, that can really mess you up if you're not used to shooting, period. So.
Because hearing is very important, the way the ball bounces off the rim when they play the Final Four in
Yes.
NFL-style stadiums.
Yes.
That's the acoustics, the vibration, that all plays a part in shooting.
Absolutely. I remember that game, I think it's Villanova, North Carolina, where they played at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. That had to be different. I mean, I would love to play in that, but the shooting, it had to be completely different from what they were used to.
That can give somebody, seriously, dizziness and vertigo at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, plus, you look in Denver, the altitude up there, that must be really tough for the Nuggets opponents.
Oh, yeah. There's an advantage there. I actually tried out for the Nuggets years ago.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, made it down. Of course, everybody's cliche, made it down to the final cut. But
Yeah.
I remember getting there and being able to walk up the stairs to my hotel and was gasping for air because of the air being so thin. So it took a couple days to get used to that.
Yeah, there's no shortcut for success. There's no shortcut for rinse and repeat. It's a lot of repetition.
Yes, repetition for sure.
Very good. Jason, all the best to you and your family. Jason Pryor, basketball shooting specialist. He's at Passage. He went to Longwood, and he does very well with shooting the three. Jason, all the best.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, I want to thank our guest today in our January 2024 show. Hard to believe, folks, we are now into our 32nd year. Jeremy Fritz, Director of Recreational Services at CNU, and Mr. Jason Pryor, Basketball Shooting Specialist as well. I want to thank our wonderful crew. Without the crew, we can't do a show, and Mr. Ray Price and his great team. I'm Greg Nicoveras. Happy January, Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you soon.